Nandan, great to be with you here. There are very few people who I think who have profoundly transformed this country and transformed it in so many different ways as you have. And just before we start, I mean, I don't think you need any introduction for anywhere, but and when I say different ways, and this is directly relevant to the conversation, right? If first, as the co-founder of Infosys, so you're one of the progenitors of the Indian IT revolution. One of the big job creators. As the chief of UIA, DIA, the creator of Aadhaar, pretty much changed the underlying plumbing of our society, of our economics. I think some have called you the CTO of India. You look at UPI, 23 trillion of rupees transacted last month. None of that possible without Aadhaar. But most recently, you've also been involved, I think, I was reading your papers recently on the Finternet with the Bank of International Settlements with Augustine, looking at how the vision for global financial systems, your work on with the International Energy Agency, which you've been involved with on digital energy grid. You've also written books, Rebooting India, Reimagining India, and I think your last book, the subtitle of that is my favorite, which is about remaining calm in a digital world. So now coming to AI, there's not too much calmness in the AI world right now. We've just had DeepSeek. We've had the response from OpenAI. You've had responses, political, strategic responses from Washington, from New Delhi, from Beijing. There's a lot of stuff happening in the AI world. So how important, in your view, is AI for India's strategic sovereignty and for autonomy?
No, I think AI is extremely important. It is strategic, and being a leader in AI is, I think, very important for India. And I think what I see is also how it can be applied at population scale to solve basic things. How to use AI to make education better so more kids learn, or how to use AI so farmers have access to the right information at the right time in the right language, so they can be more productive. So I think, to me, all this AI is as good as its application and its usage. And there I think India will definitely be a leader in applying AI at scale.
So one of the things that the last time when we had spoken on a stage like this was just after the government changed in 2014.
It's 11 years back.
Yeah. And you had, to an audience like this, explained what Aadhaar, the use case for Aadhaar is going to be, India Stack, which created really the foundational things which led to our economy now. I think about $100 billion worth of market value being generated by companies who have been built on using the platform of Aadhaar and so on. So when you look at AI and where we've done the phase 1 of digital public infrastructure. Now that AI is coming in, how do you expand the use cases on scale for our usage as a developing country?
Well, I think DPI and AI are complementary. DPI has laid the foundation in terms of large systems, a lot of data, all of which are required for the AI. And so AI will be built on top of DPI, and DPI in turn will get turbocharged by AI. So it's a very synergistic relationship. And I think what DeepSeek has done, I think, which is very important, is they have shown that you don't need billions of dollars to create a reasonably good large language model. So I think that's the big breakthrough, and they've also published the entire how they did it. So I think that's very important. They've been very open about it. So I think now the barrier to entry of creating these AI models has significantly come down. And I know that the government of India is very focused on that India AI mission. And I think you will see in the next 1 year some very significant models coming from India.
So you had said recently that India shouldn't really invest significantly in foundational models or LLMs. Let the big boys in Silicon Valley do that. Let the guys with the chips do that. We should focus on AI for application on top of that. Have you changed your mind?
No, I think it's really at what price point. Would I spend $1 billion building a large language model? No. But if I can deliver a large language model in 50 million, sure, why not? So it's also about the fact is that the technology is moving so quickly that it's dropping in price, is becoming more efficient. So there is a time at which, and frankly, LLMs will be commodities. See, they're not, it's not really, there'll be, you can already see that every day there's a new announcement of somebody or the other. So it's going to be a race of all the people, and I think now we can actually build models, but we should not take our eye off the ball, which is how is this useful to society? What is it going to do that makes a difference? So I think if you can do an LLM for 50 million, I would recommend that we do it. But then we should also look at how to use it.
So with DeepSeek, and you talked about this, it's been talked about like a Sputnik moment, right? When the Russians did that, it led to America taking the moonshot, and it had huge, profound impact, not just on space, but Silicon Valley and all kinds of aspects of the economy. Now, at the moment, China seems to be investing significantly in core tech, from various things, from AI to robotics to other things. Can India really afford not to go big time into this?
No, I think we should be. All I'm saying is that we should do it at the right time, at the right cost point. And I think now the building of core models is now at a quality and cost point which anybody can do it. $50 million, so many companies can spend that. So I think now is the time to do that. But again, the challenge with AI is how do you make it work? How do you make it work at population scale? How do you make sure that it's very cheap to operate? Because this, they say inference and reasoning and all kinds of things, but they're very expensive from a compute perspective, and we can't afford those costs. So if we want a farmer in a village to speak to his phone in Hindi or Bhojpuri or Maithili or whatever, and get a very reasoned answer on what he needs to do so that he can improve his productivity, and I want to do that at a few, a rupee per transaction, that's a whole different ball game, and that's where we have to go.
So one of the things that DPI did and was that it completely transformed our rural economy in multiple ways. For example, with direct benefit transfers, what it did to the political economy, to politics. But it also created financial inclusion. It led to 600 million bank accounts. Which other specific use cases you have in mind, let's say for agriculture, education and so on, where once you add AI to it, for example with PM Kisan, when you add AI to it, how will that change?
It's already using AI, by the way. PM Kisan already uses AI for questions. I think there are many users of it, but I'll take three which I think have the highest multiplier effect for India. First is language. We are a country with 22 official languages and a few hundred languages and dialects. And that in some sense is, when we talk to each other, we have to speak in English or in Hindi because that's pretty much the common language that we all have. But if I'm a farmer sitting in Odisha and I speak only Oriya, or I'm in Bengal, I speak only Bengali, how do I get access to knowledge? How do I get access to the internet? And I think we can use AI and all the new things like LLMs to make it possible to have voice communication in a language of your choice with the computer. So that dramatically expands access. You don't have to be literate, you don't have to read, you can just talk. And we can be so subtle that in India every 50 kilometers is a dialect version change. You can handle all that. So the very fact that we can build AI at scale for language and remove language as an impediment for access itself is huge. So 1 billion people can now communicate with the computer. And one of the things that I've supported for the last 6 years is something called AI for Bharat at IIT Madras, which is a philanthropic thing. And they have built the largest database of Indian language in the world. And that is now being used by everyone else to train their models. So that's like a core, it's like a DPI. It's a core infrastructure of open data on Indian language anybody can use. So language is one clear, huge, massive benefit. The second is in education. We know that our children are still not fully learning basic literacy and numeracy. Of course, the recent ASER report, after 20 years, is starting to show some improvement in reading and numeracy and all that, but nowhere in the scale we want for our future. And we think that AI can play a huge role here, because with AI you can do very micro diagnostic of where exactly the child is not, like an ECG of their learning, and say, okay, this child it doesn't know this vowel or this syntax or this whatever. And we have built, one of my NGOs, XStep has built that, and it's being rolled out in 3 states. So you imagine at scale, if you can improve the literacy and numeracy of children, that's huge. Society will benefit hugely with more literate and numerate people, right? And the third thing is, we think in agriculture. So we are creating this thing called Open Agri Network, which brings all agri knowledge at your fingertips with reasoning and inference capability, and in a network way, so it can come from different locations. And the government of India has a project called Vistar, which based on the same infrastructure. Many of the states now want to do it. So I think if you can have every Indian communicate with each other effortlessly through language, if every child can learn better with AI, and if a farmer can improve his earnings, good enough.
I think you've pointed out recently that by the end of this decade, more Indians will be using AI than anybody else in the world. Now, and I think one of the arguments you've made is that it's not a solution issue, it's more about distribution.
Yeah.
How do we distribute the solutions to a much larger scale? So how does private sector and government work on that?
No, I think the early population scale applications will probably come from government. I mean, PM Kisan already uses AI.
Some 3 lakh farmers were talking to using AI when the date was...
And you can see the spike. Whenever the PM Kisan is that cash transfer, right? So whenever there's a cash transfer, there's a spike in usage because the farmer wants to know what's happening to his money. And he's conversing with the AI. So it's already right there live. So so population scale applications will come from government. And what that does is it ensures that we know how to do this at scale cheaply. Because that is a big thing about our DPI also. The fact is, today you talked about UPI. UPI does 17 billion transactions a month, 400 million active users, 50 million merchants, and you can make a 1 rupee payment. People are paying 1 rupee and there's no transaction cost. So the ability to build at that scale cheaply is something we have perfected. And we'll apply that, in India we'll apply that same thinking to AI. So I think the government will be actually the pioneer in applying this to different cases. And then the private sector will do it for that. For example, if you look at UPI again, now NPC has implemented an Indian language voice command for a payment. So I can speak to the phone and say, transfer money to this person. So all that will start coming.
So we are going to take questions for Nandan from the audience. So I think there are chits on your table. So please do send your questions if you have them. And once they're with me here, we will put them before Nandan to answer. Let me, on the question of government, America has started this Target program, right? In terms of investments in AI. We have our AI mission, we have a national minerals mission which has now been started up, and after DeepSeek came out, further investments have been announced by the government of India on GPUs and various aspects of AI, both on the hardware side and on the other side. What will it take to create an Indian equivalent of Stargate? I mean, to really scale up on big scale from the government side?
Indian equivalent of
Stargate in the sense is
Stargate.
Yeah.
Stargate is it's not a government thing. It's three private guys. It's 3 companies. So I won't call it a government thing. It was announced in the White House, but that doesn't make it a government thing. So I don't think we need to go at that level because again, DeepSeek has shown that you can do this much more frugally. But I think what they're doing, what the government is doing is the right thing. They have the IT AI mission. They've got competitive bids on GPUs, so they're doing a price discovery of GPU compute, which is coming out very attractive. So that's reducing the cost of using this. They have invited people to bid on their LLM strategy. They're going to support them. Many people will bid. So I think it's all the right. And then they're building all the applications, PM Kisan, the Vistar and all that. So I think, and of course, they support AI for Bharat. So AI for Bharat gets funding from me and also from the government of India.
Right. So, in terms of, let me ask you about the two recent things you've been involved in on applications of AI. When you write about, when you wrote this, co-authored this paper on the Finternet, what DPI did was it sort of it created the building blocks which people could then build, it created a digital highway where people could kind of drive on that highway. So when you are talking about Finternet, one of the arguments I think you make is that the traditional financial world is kind of behind what's happening at the moment. So how do you use aspects of DPI or aspects of technology, tokenization and so on, to bring traditional transactions like stocks and others or bank deposits into this? How do you use AI for that? If you can explain that argument.
Yeah, so the idea of Finternet is essentially bringing in the ability to tokenize all kinds of assets. So assets can be bonds, deposits, art, horses, real estate, whatever. And what tokenization does actually goes back into the future. In the sense, if I give you a 100 rupee note, that is a token. Because that note carries everything about that. All the properties of that note are in that note. So when I give it to you, you know it's 100 rupees, you know it's issued by the government, everything is all packaged there. Or if I give you a file with all my real estate papers, that's a token. So with that file you can go forward. So digital tokenization is taking an asset and wrapping it around with all its attributes so that it is freely tradable. And in some sense, that is coming out of the crypto world. So the crypto world took things like public blockchains, the concept of immutability, which means that you cannot change an object. So that means you can then, if I give it to you, you can't change it. But they applied it to the cryptocurrency world, which then went into another spin of, you know, whom are they answerable to and all that. So that's a different thing. So we're taking the crypto capability, but applying it to the regular world.
So central banks will have to come in some form of digital currency.
In fact, the paper I wrote is co-authored with the
the Bank of International Settlements,
which is the sort of group of all central banks, and I launched it in Basel also last few months back. So the idea is that then, I'll give you an example. For example, banks can now be easier to lend to real estate or land, because land can be tokenized. It's easier to lend to art. So art can be tokenized. It's easier to lend to this. That's one example. Second is, it allows you fractionalization. I heard an interesting proposal yesterday from somebody saying, there's this stadium, and we want to tokenize it and fractionalize it, so all the fans can buy a piece of it.
Right.
Now, think about it. How do you do this, right? So you can take an asset, which is a stadium, some football stadium, and make it into a tokenized asset and fractionalize it into, you know, 100 euro or whatever it is. And then you can buy and sell those fractions. Suddenly you have made the asset liquid. So we hear all kinds, or you can use it for 24/7 trading. If you look at what's happening in the stock markets, you know, it's open only say 9:30 to 3:30 or whatever. You can use this to create 24. So there are many, many uses of this.
But then it'll also require different kinds of regulation around digital currency.
No, see, all these, no, you don't need digital currency. You can still make the payment using the regular currency, but the asset it's traded.
In terms of your work with the International Energy Agency, we wrote the foreword for this vision paper last week on what you were calling the digital energy grid. You wrote the foreword for that. How does AI change fundamentally the distribution of energy in the way that you've outlined?
I think AI does not change, but AI can be, because the grid is changing with AI or without AI. That's nothing to do with it. But if you do the digital energy grid the way we have designed it, and it's there in the paper, you can apply AI much easier to it. So what is this? I think you should ask the question, what is this? Why do you need all this?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the way to think about it is that this is the age of electricity. You know, all over the world, electricity is a growth market because consumption is going up. AI data centers need electricity. Electric cars need electricity. Tomorrow, instead of boilers, you will have heat pumps and so on. So the whole demand for electricity is going to go up. So people are calling the next 20 years as the age of electricity, because electricity demand is going to go up some 6 times in the next few decades. But the big change is in the old model of electricity, you had a single producer, some thermal power plant or whatever, and you send it over the wire and you paid your monthly bill. In the new model, every consumer will be also a producer. So in your house, if you have a rooftop solar, you have a two-wheeler or four-wheeler EV battery, you can produce electricity, you can buy it from the grid, you can sell it to the grid, the whole net metering and all that. You can store it in the battery, you can charge your battery when the sun is shining, you can sell to the grid when it's at night when the demand is higher. So every person in the world who has all this at home can become a producer, consumer, buyer, seller, and storer of electricity.
Right.
So there'll be millions. If you look at the Prime Minister's program on rooftop solar, that's 1 crore, they're talking about 10 million rooftops. So every one of those persons can be in the business of buying and selling electricity. It's a whole new world. So how do you coordinate this massive network of players? Requires a very different kind of thinking. So that is what the DEG is about. Right. On top of that, you obviously apply AI to every decision of that. So AI is a consequence. I mean, AI can be done without this, but this will turbocharge your ability to apply AI to manage the grid of the future.
So, in terms of your work with, what do you spend most of your time on? You said you do about a day a week with Infosys, and
yeah. So I'm the non-executive chairman of Infosys. So I spend 20% of my time on that, and I spend another 30-40% of my time on different types of DPI, AI, all this stuff which I just talked about. The rest of the time I don't do anything.
So when you're not doing anything, how do you reflect on what are your thoughts on intellectually on? See, a lot of people are talking about AI as a huge disruptor on the scale of, say, what the steam engine was or what electricity was, and that's changing society as we know it. In terms of jobs, where that affects everybody, do you see this as a huge problem or as an opportunity?
No, I see it as an opportunity, but then I tend to be optimistic about everything, so that doesn't mean much. But I think that, yes, obviously it will have impact on some jobs, and some jobs which can, but many jobs will not, there will be only a few jobs that will be totally taken out. There will be many jobs where a lot of the tasks will be taken out, but not all the tasks, so they still have work to do. So it will help human beings to become much more productive and effective in their jobs. So I think it's a net positive. And also, it's going to create new jobs that we didn't anticipate earlier. Now, if you look at India, you don't have enough teachers, you don't have enough doctors, you don't have enough nurses, you don't have enough of every skilled resource. So if you can use AI and amplify the ability for people so that more people can learn, more people can get healthcare, more farmers can get better information, then it's a very net positive. So it all depends on how you architect it. You can either do it in an extractive way where some guy has all the data and then he makes money off you, or you can do it in an inclusive way where everybody benefits. So even DPI at the heart of it, if you think of it from an ideological point of view, is about creating inclusion at scale. So AI also should do inclusion at scale.
So let me ask you this question, that when you came to government as the head of Aadhaar, you set up the UIDAI, it was a great example of a technologist coming from the private sector, coming in and transforming I think you had one piece of paper saying create a unique ID system, but nobody really knew what that meant. A unique identity system, one paragraph, right. We have another technologist of a different kind, of a different makeup altogether in the White House right now, changing US government. So there are people saying India should also have a transformation, a tech transformation of a different kind. So how do you look at what's happening there, and what kind of intervention do we need now at our end?
Well, first of all, I think what we did over the last 15 years, 1.3 billion people with Aadhaar, 80 million times a day, 700 million people, new bank accounts, the mobile network, Geo used that for acquisition of 100 billion customers, direct cash transfer running into a few $100 billion, UPI, etc. So lots of stuff has happened in a sense, but it's not happened in a confrontational way, let's put it that way. So I think that the difference is probably that.
Right. That's a good answer, actually. So I was wondering if you'll sidestep that or... So let's take some questions. There's a question from the audience. Considering the change that is happening due to AI, how can the educational institutions design their curricula in order to engage better with students and with relevant skills?
Well, one is, of course, we have to contemporize the education in universities, and that's about classroom. But also, I think the bigger question we have to ask ourselves is, what do people do in a world of AI? In the sense, if AI is going to do a lot of things which human beings did, then what do people do, right? That's a core question. And I think the two or three things that are very clear. One is the human skills of empathy, motivating, leadership, collaboration, those will become even more valuable. Right? So I think our institutions have to build those capabilities in our people, that it's the human skills, because human skills are not going to go away. They'll become more valuable because you can have all the AI in the world, but if you can't get 5 people to work together and you can't collaborate, then you can't get anywhere. So I think building those human skills is going to be required. Second is first principle thinking, being able to step back and go to first principles and analyze something. That again, AI can't do that because AI is more mechanistic in its approach. And then of course, creativity. How do you get people to be creative? Because that again is an area where it's not clear that AI can do that much. So I think we have to look for what is it that we have to do in a world which is full of AI and still be useful, relevant, satisfied with life and all that. So I think that I would rather go there than say, learn skill A, B, or C, because skill A, B, or C may not be relevant 5 years from now.
So there's another question. What steps are being taken to on safeguarding information, particularly data protection? Because that's a huge concern around privacy and also sovereignty. So how do you...
In the context of...
In the context of all kinds of AI applications which people are using, so what steps should government take for data protection and so on?
No, I think that's a very important question because AI, to be effective, has to be trained on a lot of data. And therefore, people will be rightfully concerned if their data is being used and so on. So I think that, and fortunately in India now, we have a very good DPDP bill, data protection bill, and I think that will also govern the AI usage. But ultimately, privacy is about personal identifiable information. As long as you have anonymized it so that you can't trace it back to a person, then you should be able to process large amounts of data without affecting any human being.
Well, you know more about that debate than most people because you spent a lot of time fighting that debate.
Second longest case in the Supreme Court.
That's right. There is a question, and it's an interesting one, that you've spoken about use cases of AI in fintech and agriculture, but what about e-commerce? What about ONDC in particular, which is something that you've been engaged with? What do you see the prospects of that going forward, and any use cases of AI in that?
No, I think you can have specific use cases. I mean, for example, on the buyer side, AI can help the buyer come quicker to the right purchasing decision. On the logistics side, AI can be used to figure out what's the maximal route to deliver something. So there are going to be a lot of, but they're all point uses of AI to solve something in that system. I mean, today, what we don't realize is that India has been using AI for a long time. We are one of the bigger users. If you look at Aadhaar authentication, you can authenticate with a biometric, right? You can fingerprint, iris, or face. And one of the concerns is, what if somebody fakes it? And the AI authentication, the algorithm for authentication in Aadhaar checks for liveness, that it's a real human being and not a photograph. And that's all using AI.
So, there's another question around misuse, which is about, there's a big concern regarding AI being misused by different actors, so especially in terms of deep fakes. So how does one go around protecting it? What kind of safeguards government should build?
No, I don't know. That's a genuine issue of deep fakes, and we had fakes, we have deep fakes, we have scams. India is the only country which has a scam called digital arrest. I don't think anybody else has digital arrest as a scam category. So, so we have all kinds of things happening here. I think, at least in some sense, Aadhaar actually solves that issue of if you want to show that somebody is a live person, then you can actually do an Aadhaar authentication. So before AI was created, we already had like the framework for that. So I think AI will have a lot of it. Deep fakes, misinformation, hallucination, there are many issues.
There's another question. What about biases in AI? This is something that you talked about, especially with languages and Indian language models. So Saket has this question that how does India address the issue of biases and monitor ethical and social?
I think that's actually one of the best reasons why you should build your own LLMs. Because if you just bring outside LLM, then you bring its biases with it. So if you ask me what's a very good argument for building India's own LLMs, it's because we can train it on Indian data, Indian context, and that will actually help.
So on that question, in the last couple of months, several people in the tech world have come and said that they disagree with your previous view on LLMs. How do you want to respond to that?
I was saying it in
that's
context.
too simplistic.
See, if you look at the big four guys, between them they're spending $300 billion on building up their compute and AI and buying chips from NVIDIA and all that. All I said was we don't need to get into that thing. That right now we use AI to quickly make it work. Because see, making it work is tough. And when the models become commodities, then we can always build a model, which is exactly what is happening. So there's nothing. All I'm saying is there's a time and space for it. You don't start by spending billions of dollars building a model without a use case in mind. You use existing technology, make it work, learn how to use it, and then as the technology prices collapse, you build it yourself.
There's another question regarding health, which is something we haven't talked about too much. It's regarding Ayushman Bharat and the digital mission, that hospitals, according to Anmol, who's asking this question, are still reluctant to integrate AI because for various reasons. So how should we curb this reluctance to engage with AI because it might underreport profits, according to this question?
No, I don't know what is this use case.
I think he's talking about private
underreporting
I think he's
private. I don't understand, but I think when you do large scale transformation, whether it's Ayushman Bharat or whatever, you have to find out ways so all actors have a stake in the success.
So see. Coming back to the larger rubric of this conversation was around DPI to AI. One of the things that happened with DPI was that you could create different building blocks of it. You built Aadhaar, then the financial inclusion happened. On top of that, NPCI came in, the UPI thing happened, which allowed DBTs and all of that. But it took a Nandan Nilekani to build the initial part of it. It took a Dilip Asbe to work on NPCI. It was a private, multiple people. I think it's a question that the director of IIM Bangalore, who's here, he I think wrote this thing a couple of days back. Who are the next Nandan Nilekanis and who are the next Dilip Asbes?
Okay, I can't solve that. But see, I think we were fortunate that we had a bunch of people who have been working together for 15 years and have a belief that DPI and now DPI plus AI is the way to go for a large country like India. So we had the original team at UIDAI. And by the way, NPCI started at the same time as UIDAI. Yeah. That's one of the great coincidences of India. 2009, UIDAI was set up. Around that time, NPCI was set up. And we worked together and built the KYC and the Aadhaar-enabled payment system and the DBT. All that was built in that time.
And the banks were involved, the RBI was involved in that?
Yeah. No, RBI was a great support. RBI has been a fantastic support for this. And after I finished, I became an advisor to NPCI. So I worked with Dilip and Pramod and all that, and that's how the UPI thing happened. So it's a bunch of guys who've been working together who are a common sort of goal.
So do we need that kind of moment to be recreated with the similar people or different kinds of people, but to sort of kickstart things in the way that DPI got kickstarted? In India, with AI?
Of course. I know it's already happening. I mean, there are many people working on AI quite selflessly today. I mean, if you look at Professor Mitesh Khapra at IIT Madras, he's building this AI for Bharat, which is part of the Bhashini program. It's amazing what he's done.
There is a question about, I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand the handwriting on AI applications in safely and preempting fixed asset failures. I'm not quite sure what that means. Sorry? On safety.
Yeah, I'm sure you can do it. I'm not an expert either on the railways or on safety, but I'm sure you can apply AI there.
So let me ask, and we'll have to conclude. So last question on this. You wrote a piece 3 or 4 days back, on I think last week, talking about the IT Act, talking about how we've had a first phase of reforms with DPI and other things, and we are now getting the second phase. How do you see the IT Act, and how do you see the use cases of AI in particular now on the larger financial underpinning of the economy?
Yeah. Again, AI is already in some ways used in the financial system, both in income tax and in GST. AI is used to catch fraud and so on. So that's already happening. I think the Income Tax Act is a big step forward because it's basically a lot of simplification,
From 5 lakh words it's become 2 lakh
and
words.
also they've reduced the sections. So because we have to, if we really want to have ease of doing business and all that, we have to make all these laws very, very simple. And I think that's a big step in that direction.
So final word, Nandan. We have a lot of concern about the economy at the moment. We've just had economic numbers out. There is a lot of uncertainty globally, strategically, and so on. How positive or how gung-ho are you about India's economic prospects going forward?
Well, I don't know about the short-term thing, but I'm very confident that if India does everything right, it can get to 6 to 8% growth compounded.
Thank you. On that note, I think, ladies and gentlemen, please give Nandan Nilekani a big hand. Thank you.